Hey y'all, David here, welcome back. Hey, that Google Doc you have open in front of you has been reviewed by Critics United. No, I worked really hard on this. Do you mind leaving? People are trying to watch my video. We have found it has multiple inconsistencies in type and font size, and you better change this or risk— This isn't my fanfiction. What? I don't write fanfiction on fanfiction.net. What? Get the hell out of here, I'm trying to film. You are insufferable. Okay. Just leave. Get out. So annoying. Today, we're discussing one of the most hated groups in fanfiction history, Critics United. I'm going to look at how they started, what they do, and why they suck. To put it simply, fanfiction.net has this feature where you can create communities on the site. So, create forums and community threads, that kind of thing. And Critics United is one of the groups on the site. What makes Critics United, or CU, as I may end up calling them, noteworthy is what they do. On an old FAQ post, they described themselves as such. It was founded in 2010 when myself, Dark Sacred Jewel XOX, and the mod Garas One Girl were getting tired of trying to find good stories. We were both critics and were already used to getting the angry authors who didn't want to hear that their story was against the rules. Put it simply, Critics United takes it upon themselves to tell writers if their fanfiction is breaking any of fanfic.net's rules. For example, if a fanfiction has bad spelling or grammar, they will inform them of this fact. With that said, I think it should be pointed out that the FAQ answer I just read has several grammar mistakes in it. It lists 3 people in its first sentence and then begins its second one with the word both, which implies that it only listed 2. Also, used to getting the angry authors seems like an incomplete sentence or an incomplete thought or something. It doesn't make sense on its own. You're also not technically supposed to start a list with myself. Now, normally I wouldn't care about such things and I wouldn't make a point of bringing it up, but Critics United are the ones who made this a problem in the first place. They're the ones who think spelling and grammar are super important. I'm gonna call them out by their own standards, It seems only right, isn't it? For some of you off the bat right now, I'm sure alarm bells are going off. Sometimes fanfiction is written by people who are kinda young, for example, and maybe they don't know how to write very well yet. But it gets worse. If a writer ends up not listening to Critics United, more often than not, their story gets taken down. To quote from that FAQ thread again, nowhere in this process are we bullying a writer. We never report unless a writer reacts negatively or completely ignores our review. Most of us give the writer a couple of weeks before bringing them to the group. Plenty of time for any busy individual to get our review. To bully someone, we'd have to force them into doing what we want. If a story is being deleted, then obviously we didn't get them to do what we wanted, did we? I hope you're beginning to sense a bit of a tone, shall we say, from members of this group. We didn't bully them, we just reported their story and got it taken down when they didn't do what we told them to. It's totally different. We didn't force them to do anything. This is like that annoying tattletale you had in class when you were at school, who didn't technically break any rules, but was such a pedant and got you in trouble for every little thing that he basically was a bully, Just the worst person in the schoolyard. I feel like I can already sense people in the comments beginning to type and being like, well, hang on, if something is breaking the rules, then why shouldn't the site be told about it? So there's a lot of reasons why I don't agree with that line of thinking. To begin with, we need to give a bit of context about fanfiction.net, its policies, and the culture of the site as a whole. The way this site made so many bad policy decisions that kind of collectively just drove the site into a ground and turned it into the ghost land it basically is today deserves a video in its own right, but for now we're just going to focus on a few main bits and pieces. Certain kinds of stories were banned. Stories written in script format, for example, were banned. Choose your own adventure fics also weren't allowed on the site. Both of these were banned at about 2005, and the reasonings given were really weird. The long and short of it is basically that fics written in that format usually aren't very good. Yes, that's it. That's literally it. Well, there's a few other reasons too. For Choose Your Own Adventure stories, those are usually considered interactive stories by the site, and for some reason that's considered a no-no. I mean, how dare they? How dare a writer want to use the inherent interactivity that the internet gives you when you are writing and publishing stuff online? How dare they try and incorporate that into their story? They should be ashamed of themselves, the hacks. I sound ridiculous. I know. That's the point. it's a bad rule. Second-person POV was also banned around this point. There are two prime reasons that second-person you-based fics are not allowed. The first and most important reason is because it can be considered a form of CSAM. For example, you're reading a you-based fic that goes along just fine for a few chapters, but then comes to a part with a sex scene. That story is having someone run their hands down your body, exploring your more intimate attributes, removing your clothes, laying you down. You get the idea, yes? Now let's say you're 13 years old and reading the story. The person responsible for writing said story is now guilty of CSAM, and if an angry parent found out, they could not only sue the site itself, but also prosecute the writer and have them labeled as an offender for the rest of their life. The other reason that second-person you-based fics are not allowed is because they are often used for interactive stories, as in people send in reviews asking the author to write what they want, rather than going off of the author's actual own imagination. Okay, I am just gonna try and break this down. Here's the thing, NC-17 fics were technically already not allowed on the site when this rule was put in place, and they hadn't been for quite a number of years. The site was not the best about enforcing this, it's true, but whether or not you agree with that decision, banning an entire way of writing a story in the name of not having it on the site when you've already technically banned it on the site is just straight up hypocritical. Also, second person is just a mode of narrative. It's a way to write a story. The novel You is written in second person, but the main character is specifically written as a guy. He has a name in narrative. It's on the back of the book. The intention isn't for the reader themselves to imagine that they themselves are acting as the stalker. The intention instead is to make you feel closer to the character, to make it feel like you are like right behind them. Not literally them, but kind of in their head, so to speak. Like, if I were to read that, I wouldn't suddenly become a heterosexual stalker because I was exposed to it. Just the reasoning here is ridiculous. Interactive stories were also already banned before this point, like I already said, so why ban second-person stories at all? As for the talk about authors not using their imaginations, all I can say again is, how dare they? How dare they not be creative when they are writing stories based on someone else's work? Shame on them. I sound ridiculous again because this is really stupid. Literally just the dumbest line of reasoning I have seen in my entire life. In addition to this, fanfictions written in the form of chat logs or text posts on the internet were also banned, which must have really stunk for Homestuck fans because that comic is almost entirely told through chat logs. I could go on, but to make a long story short, anything that wasn't written in traditional prose was almost certainly banned. The reasons for this, I think, point more to the site being insecure about fanfiction status as a form of writing and creativity more than anything else. Just them trying to avoid anything that might make it seem lesser than in the eyes of outsiders. I was listening to an audiobook a little while ago called Mr. Magic, which was excellent by the way, and scattered throughout the entire novel are Reddit posts from people talking about the main kids' TV show that the book is about. That is an acceptable thing for you to do in a novel. That is an acceptable way to present forms of communication. That is a way we as humans communicate. It's ridiculous nowadays to ban that, and frankly, it was ridiculous to ban it in 2005 as well. A majority of these rules were not popular with the site's user base. People just kind of ignored these guidelines for the most part, assuming they were even aware of them, of course. In general, it seems like there was kind of a gap between what the staff wanted the site to be and what the actual people writing and reading on there wanted it to be. Most of these rules are not good, the reasonings given are really poor, so people just ignored them and wrote what they wanted to. As I'm sure you can imagine, when a group like Critics United came around, people were none too pleased about them acting like pedantic little rules lawyers. Not to mention, CU users could often be really mean in their reviews. I don't have a lot of examples besides secondhand accounts of this because more often than not, stories they dogpiled just kinda got taken down. With that said, I found enough anecdotes to say with some certainty that more often than not, they are quite mean. Once again, according to that FAQ, can't you be nicer in your reviews? Not all of us leave harsh reviews. Some review according to the situation, not just copy and paste the same review. Some members do have copy and paste reviews for some types of violations. It makes it less personal and more detached. It must also be taken into account that an author has most most likely lashed out at a member, and at that point, we don't feel the need to be as kind in reviews. We're not always mean is not a good excuse, you guys. In addition to this, I also found anecdotes from people talking about how just complete and total strangers left mean reviews on their stories, claiming to be part of Critics United when they actually weren't. The group has basically invented a cudgel that can be used to cyberbully writers. It's really unpleasant. Some old secondhand anecdotes and an FAQ weren't enough for me. I wanted to dig deeper. I wanted to get a better idea of what the group was like, be as comprehensive as possible when I'm researching this topic. And luckily for me, Critics United's forum is basically open to the public. With that in mind, I decided to do some poking. So on their forum, they have this as their group image. I guess it's their coat of arms. This would probably be good to put in the thumbnail, but it's so low quality an image, I might have to try and mock up my own. Maybe I'll put it on the head of a policeman or something for the lulz. I don't know, just kind of spitballing ideas right now. Besides the group's acute interest in graphic design, the first thing I noticed was a thread entitled Stories You're Not Sure What to Do About. So this is a really old thread. It dates back from not too long after the group was founded. I'm sure we've all in our travels in reading and looking at the various stories here run into a few here and there we just can't figure out if they're a rule breaker or not, so I thought making a section where we can just put the title of the story and others can look and post back here what they think before any sort of action is taken. That was a run-on sentence and I'm pretty sure it had a grammar mistake in it somewhere. I'm just gonna say right off the bat, the first thing I'm seeing on the first page of this discussion thread is group members hating on Shakespeare. Way too many people based their stuff off of Shakespeare's, and it's as terrible as the original source material. Yup, it's pretty easy to see when they copy Shakespeare. I hate it when they take two characters who have no business being together, who exchange 2 sentences in canon, and totally rip off Romeo and Juliet with them, only letting them live at the end. Yuck. Complaining about stories not following canon is really funny to me. It's fan fiction. What do you expect? There's a bit more discussion here about one writer in particular who I guess was trying to write in iambic pentameter. That girl is quite the bloody muppet. I'm quite tempted to post an angry rant and dissect her iambic pentameter into nothing. Now, if only I knew how to read poetry or what an iambic pentameter is. She blocked you, lol? Wow, that's the cutest ever. Then rants in an author's note? What a child. Ooh, I've heard of iambic pentameter. Too bad I don't remember what it is. This group is really selling me on their intellectualism. I can see they really care about good literacy. This author is a monstrosity. Their lack of use of grammar, spelling, capitalization, punctuation, and the pure disregard they use. They're also one of those authors who uses an OC that matches their profile name in all of their stories. I've dealt with them and they honestly don't care whether or not it's awful, and have told me so. I know that they can be reported for the use of bad grammar and spelling, but I was wondering if I can report them for a self-insert, because I do believe it to be. Were OCs not allowed? Maybe just self-inserts weren't? Okay? I feel like you're just trying to bully them again, but alright. I found this story, and I'm not sure if it breaks the rules. Only thing I can think after reading it is I've wasted a minute or two of my life from having just read it. You've also wasted more time by complaining about it and talking about it to other people, so I feel like you're actually compounding the problem by bringing it to the group's attention. Although that story isn't very good, it's not breaking any rules that I can see. I suggest leaving them one of your beautiful reviews, lol. So if it's not breaking any rules and the main goal of this group is to make sure people are following the rules, why bother writing a review? Especially because the person in question's already complained about how much time the story is wasted for them. Also, the phrasing here, beautiful reviews lol, just makes it sound like it's actually going to be quite a nasty one. Unfortunately, that fic is no longer around, so I can't check its reviews, and so I can't tell you what this person said. As I've already mentioned, people were not always happy about finding aggressive, hyperpedantic weirdos leaving unpleasant reviews in their review section on the site. Sometimes, in response to that, they would lash out. And some of the more aggressive responses people in the group got were compiled in a thread titled Worst Review Responses. Lovely little shout out on someone's profile on a fic recently added to the SIV. To the people reading blank, for some reason they have to blank out swear words and the names of stories. It might get deleted for script write. Anyway, I am posting it on my DeviantArt, which is blank. I will keep posting on here until they probably delete my account for it, so sorry. So, instead of fixing the story and trying not to get they account removed, again, grammar mistake, along with their other writing, which is within the rules, they would rather keep the rule breaker up and complain about the rules while being an immature little brat in the process. I know we all say it often, but I don't get the thought process of these kids at times. Another on the first page of this thread, there's a new excuse/reasoning/argument that the kids like to use, Yuna. They're all convinced that if all the rule-breaking stories and writers go away, that no one else will remain. It's essentially the everyone else does it line with a twist. They fail to see outside their little bubble that rule breakers are not the be-all and end-all of the site, despite their large number and sheep-like followers. So I'm just going to point out now, just on the first page of this thread, almost every person who they're complaining about is someone who they say is either a teenager or a child. They are telling off children for writing badly. I just want that to sink in for a moment. A new user put their Minecraft work in one of the A sections instead of the proper category. Spelled category wrong here. A common mistake, I'll admit it. I just gave them a review telling them such and gave them a few nice tips since their length, capitalization, and paragraphing were faulty. The story is in the proper category now, but they responded to my message as follows. It's not my fault my teachers don't teach us anything. Why are you going after kids? Just why? Here's another response where they talk about this in the thread. Okay, I'm not trying to be mean here. I am not that kind of person, but me and my parents think it's crazy that you took the time to rant over a 13-year-old girl. Right now, I'm just going to point out a few things. First off, I know my grammar is blank. I'm in school right now and I might have some trouble, but I still love writing. Second, people make fan fictions with them getting sucked into them all the time. So I imagine it was like, she woke up one day and she was in the world of The Last Airbender or something. I distinctly remember one My Little Pony fanfiction I read when I was a teenager that had this plot. I don't think it ever got finished, but it was definitely a self-insert. It was like a brony who ended up in like Equestria, and it was really funny because the brony kept swearing and all the characters were like really uncomfortable with it. Really weird, but really fun too. It's stuck in my mind for whatever reason. So many of the comments in this just seem plain mean. Why are you telling off a 15-year-old? What are you doing with your life? There is one last thread on here I want to discuss. It's the tip line thread, where non-CU members can inform the group of stories which have broken the rules, who have been informed that they have broken them. This was one of the stories that the author had accepted some OCs I sent, 3 to be exact, and I used to review every chapter. On the 28th of July, I sent the author a PM informing him that his story counts as interactive because he had put the OC form on a chapter instead of putting it on his profile. Why would that matter? On the 29th, I noticed that there was a chapter which I hadn't reviewed, and I once again advised him to move the form to his profile. About 4 hours before this post, he updated the story, but he didn't remove the form from the last chapter. So, let me see if I got this straight. This person used this form in the first chapter, and then told the author off for having it in the first chapter. And I'm also pretty sure that having a form like that in the first place would mean that the story is inherently interactive no matter what, no matter whether or not you put it in your profile or in a link in the story. Getting an author to put in your OCs and then telling them off for it just seems wrong to me. I'm sorry. And again, I'm pretty sure this would count as interactive no matter what. So I don't understand the distinction between having the form in the profile versus in the chapter. It seems like pedantry. Either way, I don't see a problem because, like, who cares? Really, who cares? Now, to be fair, some of the fics that Critics United did report were in fact really bad. Sometimes they were plagiarized from other accounts on the site. Sometimes they were really nasty troll fics that were just viscerally unpleasant. But the existence of this tip line thread and a lot of the language that's used throughout the group on here just puts a really bad taste in my mouth. It's gatekeepy, and I know I keep saying mean, but it's mean. And a lot of the stuff they're going after is by young people, and they seem very cognizant of that fact, and they don't seem to care. And even the stuff that's not by young people, it's a lot of stuff that's just kind of reflective of what a lot of fan fiction is like. You know, I know the site hates second person, but I'm going to use it now because I want to prove a point. Also, I've now changed my camera setup because I wanted to sit down. Continuity be damned. I want you to imagine that you're a young writer in 2012 or 2013, something like that. Maybe you yourself are 13 or 14, and you love the Hunger Games. a lot. And you're sad because the next movie hasn't come out yet. But then you discover fanfiction.net and you find all sorts of stories on there. Maybe, in fact, you're Team Gale. You read all sorts of nice fluffy stories about him and Katniss being together. You really enjoy these stories. And then you notice that other people are writing other kinds of stories about other iterations of the Hunger Games. And that idea really excites you. You decide to write a story about a version of yourself in an earlier version of the Hunger Games, one that takes place from before the books. You imagine yourself as the hero, acing every challenge and giving the proverbial middle finger to the government, much like Katniss Everdeen did in the books that you love so much. You write your first chapter about Ariana Elizabeth Everfell, a member of one of the poorer districts of Panem, and you end up getting some positive-ish responses. A few chapters in, you start asking a few of your readers to give you names of characters that you can use in your Hunger Games story. And they do, and they love it. They love seeing their OCs in action, and you love writing them. You love the communication, and you're loving the creativity. And no, it's not good, and you're not really reading your stories again a second time to make sure that the grammar and spelling is okay, but people are liking it. And then you get a review from a total stranger, and it tells you off for having poor grammar, for including OCs, and for making the story interactive in the first place. And of course, they go after the fact that you have an obvious self-insert, and you're informed that you have to take down the story and rewrite it, or else it will get deleted. And the reason why is because you're now told that it follows rules that you were not aware were in place and that you've not seen anyone else follow. You've just been having fun, and as a young teenager, your emotions run high, and they run high fast. You have a go at them, angrily telling them off for bullying you. Maybe you cringe later because the review wasn't that rude, but it came so out of left field it threw you for a loop. A few days later, it's still bothering you, and you check the forum that person said they were a part of. There, you discover that several people are mocking you for your reply, and are all planning to report the story en masse. Not long after that, it's gone. You have the story saved, but you don't want to repost it. You've been discouraged. You've come away feeling angry and frustrated. Maybe you continue to write it on another site like Wattpad. Maybe you don't. But one way or another, it really puts a damper on what was up to that point a great creative outlet for you. I want to present another hypothetical to you as well. I want you to imagine that you're a teenager again, this time a bit older, maybe 18 or 19, maybe even 20, not a teenager at all. You enjoy writing a lot, and you have recently gotten into the Phoenix Wright games. The Phoenix Wright games are part point-and-click adventure game, part visual novel. Dialogue is presented in the form of text boxes underneath little pictures of the characters, and you decide that you like this franchise and these stories so much that you want to write your own cases for Phoenix to solve. To emulate the style of the video games as best as you can, with the format you have on fanfiction.net, you decide to write it in the form of a script. You do this because you think it will evoke the kind of dialogue box interactions you get in the video games. You write a few chapters about a case, upload it to ff.net, you then get distracted. You're in college. You're living on your own for the first time. Finals are coming up. You're making friends. You've got a lot going on and your fanfiction is just not a priority. A few months later, you start getting the itch to continue the story. You return to the site to discover that your story is gone. You then see several DMs from people warning you that the story has broken the rules because it's a script fic, and that you've risked it getting deleted. But there's not a lot you can do about it right now. You got busy, you looked away from just a little bit too long, and all that hard work is gone. I don't care that fanfiction.net has rules banning things like interactivity or script fics or whatever else. I actually don't care that much about the fics that have bad grammar to begin with, to be honest. And you want to know why? Because it's fanfiction, and the barrier for entry is super, super low. Anyone can write it, and with a site like fanfiction.net, where they're not meticulously checking every story, of course a lot of stuff's gonna fall through the cracks. Not to mention, ff.net already has something of a reputation amongst other fanfiction sites. I think Wattpad is the one with this reputation nowadays, but for a long time, fanfiction.net was known as the place where good fanfiction, or just fanfiction as a concept, went to die. During my research for this video, I discovered a page on fanlore.net entitled hit of voles. This was a term coined by a LiveJournal user in 2001. They used it to refer to FF.net because they felt it had a lot of really poor quality fanfiction compared to basically anywhere else they looked online at the time. And that term, I guess, was pretty popular because it does have a fanlore page and other people used it in their own writing on LiveJournal. And I bring this up because it just goes to show, if you were going to try and police any site at the time, fanfiction.net is not the one you should try and police. It's not. The stories on there are oftentimes of lower quality. I imagine the fact that it presents itself as being so friendly to minors, it is going to have a lot of minors who are writing on there. But even if I'm wrong in making this assumption, and fanfiction.net is almost entirely filled with perfect, classic pieces of fan works, I still don't care. Because you know what I can do if a story I find online is really bad? I can click away. I can just keep looking for something else that is better, which is something these people could do as well if they could find the time between, their real lives and the time they spend online bullying minors. But, maybe that's why fanfiction.net had all these strict rules in place, but none of them, or the actions of Critics United for that matter, really changed its reputation. If anything, it made the site extremely hostile to a lot of writers and readers out there. And the group is still around today and is still hated. I know I called fanfiction.net a ghost town, and compared to some of the other sites online that's true, but it is still fairly active. In a Medium article from 2019, writer Mad Soulless Queen talked about her own bad experiences with Critics United. I lost all my stories on the site and it was heartbreaking, but I flipped my middle finger to the world and started reposting. A few days ago, the canary in the coal mine went dead and Critics United is readying their pitchforks to attack me for a story called Blood Moon. After all, fanfiction.net would rather protect them than the people who write the stories that generate traffic and revenue. In this Medium article, she also pointed out this rather salient bit in the site's terms of service, which seemingly protects those who send writers harassment from any kind of consequences. You further understand and acknowledge that you may be exposed to user submissions that are inaccurate, offensive, indecent, or objectionable, and you agree to waive and hereby do waive any legal or equitable rights or remedies you have or may have against fanfiction.net with respect thereto, and agree to indemnify and hold fanfiction.net, its owners/operators, affiliates, and or licensors harmless to the fullest extent allowed by law regarding all matters related to the use of the site. Maybe that's a normal thing for a terms of service to have, but as a casual reader, it sounds bad, y'all. It just sounds bad. And again, with Critics United, it's not like these efforts that they went to police the site were even appreciated by a majority of the writers on there, even the ones who were following the rules. People hated Critics United back in the day, and they still do. I think this one story from 2018 really shows what I'm talking about. On October 14th, 2018, many users on fanfiction.net discovered something. They discovered that their stories had been spammed with copy-pasted reviews from a bot that was seemingly popping up all over the site. Most of these reviews read as follows: "This is a message to all who hate CU. You need to wake up and harass them into submission. F-U, CU is the motto. Viva la revolution. Marry out." This bot would sometimes post this to a story like 100 times. It was annoying spam, even for people who agreed with the message. The fact someone even made this bot and had it spam the site says a lot on its own, I think. It just goes to show just how hated the community was, and still is. But as I said, most people were not a fan of getting their stories spammed, and it was a huge nuisance. And, as I'm sure you can imagine, it was quite frustrating for members of Critics United. And then someone decided that these messages deserved some sort of retaliation. 1 week after the Anti-Critics United bots started posting, users on the site woke up to discover that many of their profiles had suddenly gotten pro-Critics United messages added to them without their doing. Someone had hacked into the site and implemented a virus which just randomly changed the details on people's profiles. Which, what the hell? That is a much bigger violation than whatever was going on with the bot. The bot didn't hack anyone's accounts. This is not appropriate, and presumably a member or someone who agreed with them did it, so you, Critics United, you're terrible. In conclusion, I don't necessarily have a problem with a fanfic archive trying to maintain high standards of grammar and language, but a lot of the rules on FF.net have nothing to do with that. And by the time Critics United came along, the site was so understaffed and so unsupervised that having this group pop up trying to police them was not just badly received, I think it was just a mistake. The site already didn't have a reputation for having high standards, and I think that's okay. There's some stuff on fanfiction.net that I love, even though it's technically not any good. Critics United are, to put it simply, annoying rules lawyers. A vigilante group who would rather spend their time reporting stories they think are bad than actually reading ones which they think are good. What do you think of Critics United? Do you think a group like this could have been helpful if they were more constructive and didn't get so pedantic about rules? Do you agree with me when I say that FF.net's rules are draconian and pointless? Do they make sense? If they do to you, I'd like to know why in the comments. And if this is your first time here, please do stick around. I got some fun stuff in the works. I hope your day's been going well, and if it hasn't gone well yet, I hope it'll improve soon. I'm David M., and I shall see you next time.